When we're told not to do something, or even if we have a suspicion that a given activity might not be good for us, we've all experienced the tendency to get as close to doing that thing as possible. We've all experienced that. Don't touch that thing, our parents say, and we see just how close we can get. We reason that we're not actually breaking the law or the instruction we are given, but we certainly approach the line closely. The dangers of this attitude are illustrated by the following metaphor. An employer was interviewing men for the position of stagecoach driver. He asked the first man, quote, "The trail will take you over some mountains where there are some steep cliffs. As you go over the mountain, how close could you get to the edge without going over?" The first man said, I could place that tire so close to the edge of the cliff that half the wheel would be over the edge. The employer brought in the second man and asked the same question. The man said, "I'm the best driver you ever saw. I can tilt a coach up on two wheels, two of the four, and hang the other half of the coach off the edge of the mountain and still not go off the edge." When asked the same question, the third driver responded, "Close to a cliff? Are you kidding? I'd stay as far away from the edge as I could get." He got the job. Nobody begins life with the intent of becoming an addict and destroying themselves. Nobody does. Disastrous patterns, all of them, begin with one drink. Just like I recently said in another answer, every flood begins with one drop of rain. All disastrous patterns begin with one drink, one angry word, one video game, one picture of a scantily clad man or woman, one exciting experience with a phone. Any seduction begins with one experience. And while it is true that one drink or video game may do no harm at all, as many kids and adults quickly point out, all addictions still begin with one behavior that diminishes our emotional pain. So, what does this mean for us as parents? I could give you examples, real ones, all day long without breaking for lunch, but we'll discuss just a few. First, let's talk about dating. Kids spend time alone with potential sexual partners earlier and earlier in life. I used to say boys and girls spend time alone, but now there's a growing incidence of boys with boys and girls with girls and transgender relationships that can't even be defined with words that we all agree on. It's getting really difficult to define relationships. And yet studies have proven this beyond all doubt, that kids who date, which means to spend time with somebody to whom you are sexually attracted, kids who date earlier than 16 are far, far more likely to experience many of the following: early and unsafe sex, that should be obvious, pregnancy, sexually transmitted diseases, dysfunctional relationships, not just while they're young, but for the rest of their lives. Early marriage and a greater incidence of divorce, poor academic performance, substance abuse, strain in relationships with their parents, dating violence, self-harm like cutting, depression, avoidance of serious relationships as adults, negative body image, a pattern of being dependent and clingy, and limited careers and income. That's quite a list. And the increased incidence of all these things is for kids who start dating under the age of 16. I'm not making this stuff up. These consequences are pretty severe, even life-deadening. And yet, parents routinely smile and shrug off any mention of their children dating, by which I mean, again, spending time alone with potential sexual partners. The parents shrug it off when children date at age 10, 11, 12. Some parents encourage their children, I've heard them, to dress in sexually attractive ways to attract potential partners. Based on the data they've gathered, many experts advocate that children don't date, this is based on statistics, not reality, until they're at least 18. Not joking. These aren't my numbers. Although they realize that nobody in the world would listen to such a recommendation. I personally think 40 would be a good starting time. It would be far too old-fashioned and alarmist. And so the people who did those studies said, this may well not be practical, but this is what the statistics show. I can't tell you when to allow your child to date. It's not my business. I can tell you that the outcome statistics are terrible for kids who date before 16. The real question is, how close to the edge of the cliff do you want your children to get? We know there is a cliff. Statistics over many years don't lie. Allowing children to date young is like providing them cocaine at home. And they're just sitting back to see if, well, let's just see what happens. Let's see how they handle it. Maybe they'll be okay. Who would do that? No parent would do that. Or dating early would be like handing explosives to a child to play with, but without any training. Do you really want to do that? What parent would? Do you really want to drive that close to the cliff? And that's just dating. Now another issue. Let's talk about kids and their use of phones. And by phones, I mean any electronic device at all. And innumerable studies now indicate that kids who use phones for texting, social media, video games, and much more have a greatly increased risk of the following. In some cases, more than 100%. They can't be separated from their phone. That's one risk. They act like they'll die without them. They ignore their homework, their chores, and other responsibilities, and that is called an addiction. That's what an addiction is. They use their phones during meals and other family activities. Their interaction with the family diminishes nearly to nothing. They get annoyed and even disrespectful if you require them to put their phone away for the purpose of something really difficult, like, looking at you while you talk to them, or while they're doing their homework or whatever. If their phone use is restricted, they sneak extra time. They often go to bed with their phone and often stay up late because their phone's right next to them and buzzes or dings, and they talk to everybody else who is also up too late. And you're not even sure how late they stay up because you don't always check. 1 in 3 kids sleeps with their phone touching their body. They often use their phone in a place where they can be alone. The first thing they do in the morning is to check their phone, despite not doing their homework, being late for school, and so they're late for school, but they check their phone. You often have to repeat yourself to him or her because the first time you spoke, they were completely immersed in their phone. They regularly get upset about some communications they read on social media, or they brag about other communications, like how many followers or likes they have. If their phone use is interrupted by other activities or by lack of internet reception, they become really irritable, just like somebody who's withdrawing from a substance. Again, this is called addiction. They're not participating much in the real world anymore, outside of school and home, like sports and outdoor activities. You get more attitude from them than you used to. When you interrupt their phone use, they often say things like, just 5 more minutes, which turns, of course, into just 5 more minutes and just 5 more minutes. Or they just go, oh, come on. They really get addicted to these devices. They consistently put off homework and other duties to be on their phone. Their schoolwork suffers. They're more distant than they used to be. And now studies show that phones lead to altered brain function, altered brain structure. Would you allow your child to eat a food or to use a drug that changed their brain structure and function? No. But we let them use their phones, and those have been proven to do that. Brain damage, poor school performance, increased detachment from peers and from life, increased disrespect toward parents, more entitlement, and much more have all been associated with phone use to varying degrees. When my children were young, there were no cell phones. If I were raising children today, considering my experience with parents who have kids with phones, and considering the abundance of studies now available, there aren't just one or two, there are hundreds. There would be no phones in our home with any capacity to surf the web, access porn, text their friends, or anything but call their parents, siblings, grandparents, and a few others. Period. They'd have flip phones that can call and text only specific numbers. And you can get cheap phones like that in Walmart or just about any place. And you add minutes to it and their function is greatly limited. Why would I do that? Because cell phones are bad? No. But phones need to be severely limited in their use simply because kids are not prepared to be inundated by all the distractions and deceptions being sold everywhere on phones and other electronic devices. It would be just, are all guns bad? No, they're not. But the people who use them often make serious mistakes, fatal mistakes with them. So do phone users. Again, how close to the edge of the cliff do you want them driving with the stagecoach? A child having a phone is not worth the enormous risks that come with it. Now, children will protest. They will. That everyone has a phone. Yes, that's pretty much true. And everyone has access to alcohol and drugs and porn and on and on. And how is that going? Just because everybody's doing something doesn't mean it's good. An example of what I'm talking about. Let's look at our present process of legalizing recreational marijuana everywhere, because after all, they say, it's not worse than alcohol. And look at those wonderful effects. The cost of excess alcohol use in the United States has reached $300 billion a year. That's about half the entire United States Defense Department budget. It includes losses in workplace productivity, health care for alcohol-related diseases, law enforcement, and losses from motor vehicle crashes related to excessive alcohol use. The researchers believe that the studies vastly underestimate the cost of excessive drinking. Why? Because the information on alcohol is often underreported. It's not mandated, or it's often not even available. And the study did not include other costs, such as pain and suffering by the person who's an alcoholic and by the people who live with them due to alcohol-related injuries and diseases. Marijuana is proving to be headed toward the same or similar effects, or if you like, the same cliffs in our lives. And we just sit back and watch, driving close to the cliff. I am not being an alarmist. You want to smoke marijuana? I don't care. I'm describing simply the effects that it has on human beings, which would include our children. Marijuana can cause panic attacks, paranoia, psychosis, delusions, hallucinations, depression, anxiety, all proven with studies. For chronic users, the impact on memory and learning can last for days or weeks after its acute effects wear off, meaning after you've quit smoking. And this is from a major health organization in the United States. The National Institutes of Drug Abuse research show that drivers using marijuana have slower reaction times. Would you intentionally send your child out on the road with a slower reaction time? That'd be like sending your child out with an increased risk for death. Well, it's not like it. It is that. Using marijuana shows slower reaction times, impaired judgment, and problems responding to signals and sounds. If you add all that up, it means that marijuana causes accidents and death. Period. That's what it means. Long-term abuse of marijuana may lead to dependence, in fact, in some people. Major experts are now saying that it is, quote, an erroneous belief. It's wrong. That's science language. It's wrong for people in the general public to believe, and many physicians to believe, that marijuana is not physically addictive. Many people experience all the terrible effects of drug withdrawal. But we legalized it anyway, including for our children to see how close to the cliff we could drive. Where are our brains? The people who passed the laws very likely were using at the time. Now, back to phones. They don't look dangerous from the outside, not in the first 5 minutes, but the first 5 minutes of drinking doesn't look dangerous either. We all want to stay as far as possible from anything that could kill us emotionally or physically. That would mean that wise parents would impose serious restrictions on phone use, zero tolerance for anger, whining, and the other behaviors that we've talked about in the parenting training. Again, I'm not trying to scare people. I'm describing the horrifying effects that have been described by studies on all of these behaviors and substances. This is what happens when we do nothing as our children engage in risky behaviors where we can't see the harm immediately, but which have been proven to hurt children long term. I would suggest that we get smarter sooner and stay away from the edge of the cliff. What do you think?